This film is called Top Gun Maverick, which will be released in 2022. The film opens by showing a legendary captain named Pete Mitchell Maverick, who is in his airplane repair shop to repair his old airplane, which he used when he was in the Top Gun. After that he got ready to go on his motorbike. He then came to the Marine base to meet his comrades. When he got there, his colleague revealed that their aircraft project had been cancelled by Admiral Kane, because he thought that this project would fail and would not meet the standards expected by the military. But Maverick did not agree with that decision. He then revealed that he would test it directly to prove to the Admiral that this project is worth continuing. His colleagues agreed, considering that Maverick is the best pilot graduated from Top Gun. The preparations then they did. After everything was confirmed to be safe, Maverick then took off quickly with the plane. At the same time Admiral Kane arrived at the location and saw the plane leave the base. Meanwhile, Maverick kept pulling the accelerator until it showed Mach 9. He had to get to Mach 10 to prove the feasibility of this aircraft project. Until finally the number shows Mach 10, which means it has entered the high hypersonic phase. His colleagues at the base were very excited because their project was successful, but Maverick was not satisfied with that. He kept pulling the accelerator until it exceeded Mach 10. As a result, the plane started to burn because it was not strong enough to handle that speed, because this plane was designed to withstand the maximum load up to Mach 10 only. In the end the plane burned to the ground with nothing left, but luckily, Maverick managed to get out on time and land in the forest. He was then picked up by the Navy and met face to face with Admiral Cloth. Admiral Kane is confused with Maverick, even though he has served for more than 30 years, but why is his rank still captain, and always refuses when he is about to be promoted. If he doesn't refuse to be promoted, then he can immediately become an admiral. But Maverick's answer surprised Admiral Kane. For the reason Maverick remained in the captain's position was only so he could fly. If he became an admiral, then he could not serve in the field. That's why he always refused to be promoted. Admiral Kane only thinks that Maverick is a flying maniac. Then in Maverick's mind, he was invited there. He would definitely be punished for his previous defiance. But he was not punished for the previous problem. Instead he was transferred to the Top Gun program, which means Maverick will return to where he used to be while studying flight. After arriving at the Top Gun headquarters, he was greeted directly by an admiral, named Cyclone. He then explains to Maverick about the Top Gun's mission, which is to destroy the terrorists' uranium facility, which is in a mountain valley that is very difficult to reach. Maverick thought that he would be assigned to the mission, but his guess was wrong. He was transferred to Top Gun only to train their top 12 pilots, who would be assigned to carry out the mission. Initially Maverick refused because he was not a coach or teacher, but the Admiral's response was surprising. He replied that if Maverick refused, then he would be retired because of defiance of duties. Finally, like it or not, Maverick must accept the task. After that he went to the bar, a place he used to frequent when he was on the Top Gun. There he also meets Penny, his ex-girlfriend. Not long after, Maverick saw the pilots he would train. They were the best pilots in the Top Gun. But Maverick saw that if they couldn't all work together and their egos were still high, he thought it might be difficult to train them. After that, he kept watching the 12 young pilots, and suddenly he remembered the past when he was still in the Top Gun with his friends 36 years ago. The next morning, the Maverick immediately started his studies. But before that he reminded them, being fixated on the knowledge of driving an airplane is not enough, but they also have to be able to raise the limits of their own abilities, because it's not only the plane that has to be qualified, but the pilot must also have the ability to control it. After that Maverick conducts practice exams for each pilot, to drive an F-18 plane, and they take turns having to beat Maverick. If they lose, then they must be punished with push-ups 200 times. At first they thought they could beat the Maverick easily, but the reality was not what they wanted. The 12 pilots finally lost and couldn't scratch the Maverick. Yes, according to the agreement they have to push up 200 times. But after that incident Maverick was summoned by Admiral Cyclone, who immediately scolded him because the way Maverick trained was not according to procedure and could endanger them because they flew too low. but Maverick reasoned that flying low was needed during training because the mission they would do later would fly with low position. The Admiral just silently agreed, even though he didn't like the Maverick way. In the next training, Maverick explained the terrain they would be going through. They were required to fly very low over the valley, and if they flew a little high then they would be detected by enemy radar and would be automatically shot by anti-aircraft missiles. They also began to practice flying planes through the training route, where they had to fly low on a tortuous route. But as a result, they all failed the training and most of them failed due to lack of cooperation. They were still selfish. But instead of introspecting each other, they blame each other and fight. After that incident, Maverick suddenly called to meet his old friend nicknamed the Iceman. This Iceman was Maverick's old partner in Top Gun back then, and he is now a 4-star admiral. But Iceman suffers from a disease that deprives him of speech, so he communicates with Maverick only through messages. And you need to know, this Iceman is a person who always helps Maverick when he is in trouble. Even when he clearly violates procedures, he can still get away from punishment because of the Iceman's help. The Iceman asked Maverick to come just to convey Maverick to be serious about teaching, because the young pilots need it. Maverick just replied he would give it a try. After that he changed his lesson and invited them to relax for a while by playing football. But all of this was not without purpose. Maverick deliberately did that to train their cooperation with each other and build bonds. The next morning it was seen that a rear admiral named Solomon was giving information to the pilots. He said if they moved their mission forward, from 10 days to 1 week, they would advance this mission to prevent uranium radiation from spreading to the surface. After that, Maverick explains that this mission has a lot of difficulties. Flying low is not their only obstacle, but they must be able to shoot right at the target. If not on target then the mission will fail. After that they will fly over the mountains, and therein lies their biggest obstacle. They also practiced shooting targets in a state of the plane dipping quickly, but they all failed and none of them hit the target. One of the pilots even fainted when it dived upwards. Luckily, Maverick managed to wake him up by sounding the alarm. The problem is not finished yet. Phoenix's plane suddenly catches fire because it hits a bird, and he is forced to eject from his plane to save himself. After the training, Maverick got the news that the Iceman died because of his illness. Because Iceman was gone, Admiral Cyclone finally dismissed Maverick as a teacher, because from the start he didn't like Maverick. But because Maverick is a friend of the Iceman, he can't make one-sided decisions. Now Maverick has no protection, and Admiral the Cyclone uses this opportunity well. After that, Maverick went to Penny and told her about his misfortune. Penny just asked Maverick not to give up and prove if he is capable. On the other hand, Admiral Cyclone changed the attack plan from 2 minutes 45 seconds to 4 minutes. But the pilots did not agree, because if the time was that long there would be armed contact with the enemy, and would endanger their lives. When the Admiral was about to explain the whole plan, suddenly the monitor screen showed someone was driving the plane and passing through the training route. Even that person revealed he only needed 2 minutes and 15 seconds to complete the mission. The plane effortlessly performed beautiful maneuvers over twisty routes previously thought impossible. Of course this was no problem for the Maverick. He made it through all the obstacles and even managed to hit the target in 2 minutes 10 seconds. This directly proves that the tactic used by Maverick is not impossible, but because of that he was reprimanded by Admiral Cyclone, and would have sent him to court-martial if this was not a mission. But because this mission was very important the Admiral did not punish him, and instead appointed him to lead the team and allowed him to choose the pilots he would bring himself. Arriving on the day of the mission, after the preparations were done, Maverick then chose 5 pilots to accompany him. They are Phoenix, Bob, Rooster, Payback, and Fanboy. While the rest were in reserve, 4 aircraft then took off from the carrier and moved towards the target. They fly low according to directions to avoid enemy radar. After the aircraft enters enemy territory, the aircraft carrier then fires missiles and destroys the enemy airbase to prevent enemy aircraft from flying. On the other hand, the 4 planes had already entered the mountainous area and started to go through a tortuous route, and finally arrived at the target. Maverick concentrated fully on shooting the target and he finally did it. Now he just needed to wait for the Rooster to carry out the second attack, for the facility to be completely destroyed. The Rooster almost failed because he was unable to control his plane, but luckily, he concentrated again and shot on target so that the facility was destroyed. Their task now is to return to the mothership, but they are fired upon by missiles because they are flying over radar. One by one they started firing flares to block enemy missiles, until they started to run out of flares, and at the same time there was an enemy missile targeting the Rooster. Maverick then drove the missile away and saved the Rooster, but because of that his plane was shot fell. The others actually wanted to help the Maverick, but the Admiral ordered them to come back because he didn't want to sacrifice another life to help him. On the other hand, Maverick finally woke up, but he was attacked by an enemy helicopter, and suddenly the helicopter was destroyed by a Rooster attack. But because of that the Rooster was shot down by the enemy's anti-aircraft missile. Maverick immediately ran up to him. He scolded him because the Rooster came back and violated orders. The Rooster only answered if he came back to save him. The two of them then thought of a way to get out of this situation. They then headed to the enemy base and finally found a way to get out of there, namely by driving an enemy plane that looked unused and stored in the garage. They rushed to the plane, and when they found that it could still be used, they put it in and tried to start the engine. Even though this plane is decades old, Maverick is able to drive it and leave the enemy base, even though the wheels of the plane are detached. But while on the way, two enemy planes on patrol saw their plane and approached it. At first they thought that the old plane pilot was their partner, because Maverick acted well. Maverick thought the two planes would radiate, but his guess was wrong. The enemy plane was following him, thus making him shoot down one of the planes and reveal his identity. After that they were involved in a fierce chase. Enemy planes fired missiles. Mavericks immediately avoided them, and vice versa. In the end, the Maverick manages to bring down the enemy plane just before exiting the mountainous region. But their joy ended after learning that another enemy plane was following them and fired its missiles. The first shot they managed to repel with a flare, but the flare was the last on their plane, and when the enemy plane was about to make a second shot, suddenly the enemy plane was hit by a missile fired by Jeke, who came to save them. They then returned to the carrier and landed using the help of nets. Their mission was accomplished successfully, and they too were greeted as heroes. The Maverick and Rooster hug each other in pride, and the movie ends. So, what do you think about this film? Maybe you can write it in the comments column. If you like this video, don't forget to give a like sign, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.